I'm super excited and so grateful that you're here. I started this podcast so we could have some conversations that would hopefully help turn the messy into healing. If that idea sounds good to you, you must be a pathfinder too. Let's get started. Okay, hi. Oh, I'm so excited to have you. Okay, this is my mental health series. There's going to be 3 episodes. The series is called The Messy Middle. And this is episode 2, and I was calling it like bubble baths aren't enough. Just because everyone I know that I talk to in our world of caregivers, I mean, self-care is just such a, it's just such a divisive term because people get so frustrated. Like I remember when I first started hearing, put your mask on first, we just wanted to punch somebody because it was such a frustrating term. Because like, who can actually do that? But throughout the years, I've learned that I got to figure out how to do that. It's been a marathon, not a sprint, and taking care of myself has really changed my entire life and my kids. So I want to welcome you today, and I want you to introduce yourself because as much as I love you, I don't know that I would do enough justice to you. So
You know me pretty well. You'd probably do good. So my name is Kimberly Mahr, and I have a master's in clinical counseling. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Arizona and Florida. I've been doing this work for, I don't know, 15 years or so. Love what I do. I specialize in complex trauma and compassion fatigue. So I work with a lot of other mental health providers, medical providers, people that are in the trenches taking care of other people, and that aligns beautifully with people who are caregivers. I'm also associate faculty at the University of Phoenix, helping mentor and shape future counselors in their master's program. And I'm also a good friend to you. So that's who I am.
I know we go back a long way.
We do.
So that's really cool. So I wanted to kind of start and talk a little bit about self-abandonment, but you brought up compassion fatigue. So we're definitely going to have to touch on that as well. But tell me a little bit about self-abandonment, because I know the last time we talked, that was kind of your latest passion of learning and helping others.
Yeah, I obviously it stems from something in me, right? You spot it, you got it. I mean, this is something that I struggled with for years as a recovering codependent and as someone who also identifies as a recovering people pleaser. And self-abandonment is very much in line with people pleasing. It's basically the act of disconnecting from yourself, your own thoughts, your feelings, and your needs. And it's breaking the relationship you have with yourself. Basically saying no to yourself because you're saying yes to everyone and everything else.
Yeah, that really hits home with me. I mean, I've done a lot of work, as you know, but I still struggle with that, especially, I understood the part about leaving yourself behind, right? Because like as a mom and with Anthony and his special needs and his sibling brother who they end up having extra needs as well. I figured, how am I going to get out of just giving to them? Because that's my responsibility. I have to take care of them. But not until recently did I realize that it was a way to escape dealing with myself and who I am. Like that part was a little bit shocking. Like I never equated people pleasing to like escaping dealing with my own stuff.
Right. It's easier just to say yes to people. Then no one's ever disappointed with you, and you don't have to deal with those deep feelings of, not being enough, not being wanted, feeling rejected, or even conflict.
I think too, like women, don't you think we're like conditioned from so early on? I mean, I obviously didn't end up being the good girl. I caused a lot of havoc in my family, but I was definitely supposed to be,
Yeah. And women of a certain age, so you and I are what? I'm Gen X. Um, I
Yeah.
and no shade on our parents. Or society as a whole kind of conditioned us to be caregivers, caretakers. I don't caretakers would be a better name than caregivers. We were kind of taught to self-abdicate, to put ourselves second to the family, put ourselves second to the need of the children. put ourselves second to the need of our spouses if we're in a relationship like that or our partnership. In many cases, to put ourselves second in a societal role. It's not ladylike to have our own needs and wants and stand up on our own. We have to defer. And I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit, but I think we have been conditioned in large to do that. And so there's a lot of us, I think, especially in our generation and the millennials, older millennials, who are unpacking that and looking at that and going, wait a minute, we spent a lifetime self-abandoning, self-giving up ourselves to everything and everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Anthony graduated, Oliver graduated, and I had this new era of sort of adult kids. And so I sort of had this realization, wow, like maybe I don't have to make dinner every single night, and maybe I don't have to do all these things. And all of a sudden I had this sort of groundlessness and like had no idea who I was. Like my identity was just so wrapped up in, obviously in my case, it was wrapped up in Duchenne a lot, but it was also just wrapped in parenting and pleasing others. And, I kind of didn't even know what I liked. Like somebody be like, well, where do you want to go eat? What kind of food do you want tonight? I like
Yeah,
couldn't even answer. Like I really didn't know. It took
yeah.
me a while to get out of that.
Jill, that's not an uncommon juncture for, and I'll say women, but I imagine that this is true for others as well. For women, when the kids are at that point where they're kind of leaving the nest, they hit those markers, maybe kind of setting off to college or the next thing after high school years, a lot of us are left going, oh my God, what do I do with myself? Who am I? Like, it's a very untethered feeling. We've, for so many years, put everything first other than us. And now we're have an empty home and we're like, Wait a minute, like, who am I? I don't know where I fit. I don't know what I like, what I want." So it's very common. And it's kind of like, I think maybe what they used to call like a midlife kind of crisis back in the day. I don't think it's really a crisis. It's a normal developmental
I
thing.
like to call it a renaissance. I
A
had
renaissance. I love
renaissance.
that.
Yeah, because I kind of changed. And in my community, we don't get the empty nest thing because
Yeah.
our boys stay with us a lot of the times. Some of them aren't. Some of them are going off to college. Some of them are doing really independent things.
Mhm.
But then some of them we don't have those opportunities, or that's not how it's set up. So they're staying with us. But even in that regard, things still need to change. They're now adults, they don't have school every day, or if they do, it looks a lot differently. So it's a good opportunity, for that to come in and where I could start thinking about what I wanted and what I needed. And that was just really interesting. So what do you think the cost? Like what's the cost of abandoning yourself? Because I kind of have
Oh,
some ideas of what happened to me, but I want to hear from you.
right. Well, I mean, okay, the cost or the cause are two different things, but the cost of it, I mean, people pleasing, saying yes, or a constant need to overextend ourselves, to say yes to things maybe we wouldn't even at our own expense. That leaves us drained emotionally and not filling our own cups. We start to disconnect and lose connection with our gut feeling, our instinct, that little kind of intuition. We start to like lose our ability to trust. I think we're all born with an innate trusting of our instinct, right? But we talk ourselves out of that over years often, because we're listening to everyone else. And again, this is not a thing that we consciously choose to do. This is a survival skill that was developed usually early in childhood, where we have to, suppress our authentic self to kind of maintain connections with the important people in our life who maybe didn't have the capacity to meet us where we were, or they were overwhelmed, or they didn't have the emotional capacity to deal with our emotions. So the costs, yeah, they're tremendous. Another thing that, one of the costs that happens in this pattern of self-abandonment is boundaries or lack of boundaries. It's where we say yes when we're screaming no on the inside. And at least for me, it lends itself to building up resentments, which is super toxic to no one but me, right? And that's a burnout.
Yeah, I found for me, I found that I I would get really angry at little things. Like it was sort of whack-a-mole. Like it didn't necessarily come up with the person I had a resentment towards or the situation, especially in my case, like I can't have a resentment towards Anthony,
Well, you
right?
can't, but
I
it
mean,
would
I
be a
can't.
human
That's just not
thing to some,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah. So it would come up in these really crazy ways where I would, go off on, one of our providers or people that, is supposed to be helpful, but they make more work or, some of the other things that would happen that yes, are frustrating and difficult, but I would go from 0 to 50 really quick. Or with people that I really love, like my partner or my, Oliver, my other kid, my other family. I don't know if some level we think they're more forgiving, but I would be very quick tempered. And that's the first sign I would realize. And then, of course, I'd blame it on Duchenne and all that. But of course, it started way before then, right? So it did end up being that wasn't connected at all with myself. I wasn't connected with how I felt. I didn't even know on any given day how I felt. Like I just was so um I was so into over functioning. I would just over function all the time, whether I could or not. I just did. I got everything done. And I was kind of proud of that. There was like a badge of honor. And what for me the cost was is that I never knew how I felt. I didn't know if I was angry or sad or lonely or happy or joyful. Like it all just sort of felt the same,
right.
you know?
And that's really dangerous. That is a really dangerous place to be so deeply disconnected from self. Because then you think about it, and if I'm so disconnected from self and my authentic self and emotions and reality and experience, how good am I really going to be able to show up for the people that I need to show up for?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it had been so long since I was even fun, like fun with my kids. Like, yeah, so that's been a big change for me. But what is like, so if, self-care is such, it's again, I'm better, but I still kind of roll my eyes at that term. But I mean, if it's not a bubble bath and it's not just going to get a manicure, like what is self-care? Like what
Yeah.
else can we do that's real true self-care,
Yeah. I don't want to minimize it. Like if someone in your community, you're a Duchenne mom and the only thing you can eke out the time to do for yourself is to take a bubble bath, please do it. Like
Right.
do it, right? But I call that like self-maintenance, right? Going and getting a mani-pedi, getting your hair done, taking a bubble bath. That's self-maintenance. And that's something that as a human being is just part of what we do to take care of ourselves, right? It's a pleasurable thing. Self-care is it feeding my soul? Does taking the bubble bath feed my soul? Maybe if you're meditating while you're doing it. Maybe if you're reading something that's really causing you to think and grow while you're doing it. Maybe that is. But I'll just call myself out on it. The bubble bath is often, with social media in my hand, dissociating, zoning out while I'm swiping, right? That is not self-care. That's dissociating. That's numbing out. That's just checking out. So self-care, the litmus test for me is this feeding my soul? Is this thing feed? And so what could that look like? It looked like a lot of things for a lot of people. For me, it's being in community. It's a social thing, like connecting with people who fill me up, who lift me up, who challenge me, who cause me to grow, other people who are growing and learning, right? So being in community. For some people, faith, activities within their spirituality or their faith, prayer, meditation, whatever that is, or in community with other people. It could be reading. It could be reading, something that makes you connect to self, or makes you think, or expands you in some way. It could be deep conversations or meaningful conversations with your partner or your kids, things like that. So, I mean, it looks a lot of different ways for a lot of people. It just depends on who you are and what kind of time and energy you have to spend. And I know in your case, that time and energy really comes at a premium. So you have to kind of squeeze it into the fringe, right? Into those little gaps, throughout the day, probably.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember hearing this parent at a conference and And, I didn't want to make this too Duchenne specific because I think what we're talking about today really applies to so many women. And, a lot of people are caregivers now, not even to kiddos with rare disease or chronic illness, but like to their parents,
Yeah.
right? So, and I didn't mean to bag on the bath because I
Oh,
use
no.
baths to regulate myself. And there were times where I would not stop and take a bath, even though I knew I needed to just regulate myself. So, um, but I remember this woman getting up and talking in front of everybody and just saying, I don't have, you'll see once your young men get older, your boys get older, and I don't have time for friends. And if friends don't understand that I can't give them anything and I can't call them and I can't spend time with them, then they're just going to have to go away and I'm just going to have to do this on my own. And I remember feeling like, God, that's never going to be me. That could never be me. I hope I always understand how important keeping my life together is and people in my life. But now I kind of know what she meant. I mean, she said it in a very hardcore way, which still, could rub a little wrong. But what I do understand now is that I've got to say no to a lot of things that I didn't used to say no to. I used to say yes to almost everything. And when I got invited socially, especially when Anthony was younger, I was so like excited to be a part of things because I was so scared of being isolated with him, that I would say yes to a lot of stuff that I didn't really want to do, you
Right.
know? And so I kind of get that maybe there's a middle ground, of course, between that woman's feelings of frustration and maybe just, wanting to be involved in everything because you think that's healthy. But I just have noticed I'm really big now on budgeting time.
Hmm.
Like I'll look at somebody and they'll be like, "Yeah, you want to get together for dinner?" And I'll have like something else going on in that day earlier, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's too much in a day." No, I can't do it even though the time slot's open, you
But
know?
but see, that's understanding yourself. You understand your bandwidth and the very real practical limitations of your social battery, right? You know that, and
Mm.
it's discernment. It's being discerning and judicious with the way you use your. So you've moved towards the middle. You've gone from self-abandonment, where you just say yes to everything, even though probably you didn't have the bandwidth to do that. And now you're looking at things. You recognize what I'm hearing you say is you recognize the importance of those connections and maintaining those meaningful connections socially. And also, not but, and also you're discerning, you're judicious. You are self-reflective. You understand where your social battery has its limits. And that I know for you could probably change on a dime, right? Depending on what's going on in the world, in your world. Um, so I don't know if that's like an overcorrect or not, but I think that what I'm hearing it's a good balance.
Yeah, it is. But that to me has been one of the bigger changes I've made in self-care, is just saying no. Like,
Yeah.
no, sorry, can't do
I mean,
that.
you've probably heard it all over the place, but I love it is if it's not a hell yes, it's a no thanks.
Oh,
So
I haven't heard that. Oh,
yeah, oh
that's
my
funny. I've never
God.
heard that.
Okay, well, that's my self-abandonment tip is you reflect. If no one else was watching, no one else was going to weigh in on this. Is it for me? A full body hell yes? And if it's not a full body hell yes, it's a no thank you.
Oh, I
With a
like that.
period on it. Not a no thank you, but a no thank you because no blah, 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 blah. No. Hey, no thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that feels so crazy to not like explain and have stories about why you can't do this or that or the other thing. Oh my God. Yeah,
That's
just
the recovering, codependent people pleasers in us. We're
woo.
like,
Yeah.
oh, cringe.
So tell me about this compassion fatigue. I mean, I have a feeling I know what that is, but I want to hear about that.
You live it, man.
Hmm.
So what's interesting is compassion fatigue has been a term that's been around for quite some time. But they're actually, this is kind of new. Newer research is kind of deciding that maybe we should actually relabel it empathy fatigue. Okay.
Mm.
So sit with me for a second on this. The word empathy is when you can kind of basically put yourself in another person's place and kind of understand and have a knowing of what their emotional experience must be like. We can put ourselves in their shoes, so to speak. Compassion is that plus the added factor of wanting to help. I can put myself in their shoes and wanting to help.
Mm,
Um, so while you are definitely, as a caregiver, compassion drives you probably most of the time. You can put yourself in people's shoes, in their experience, and you do want to help. It's a genuine helping. And when we're helping people, it releases those good, feel good hormones, the oxytocin, right? um, when we are just feeling someone else's pain without that wanting to help component, it actually depletes us. It actually kind of wears on us and grates on it. So, and that comes about because there's not a differentiation between self and other. So if I start to take on the pain of other people, pile it on my shoulders, it starts to weigh me down. Okay. So empathy fatigue, compassion fatigue, I mean, they're kind of interchangeable, but I'm thinking we're using empathy fatigue more often, is 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 kind of burnout, where we've given so much. We are carrying other people's emotions so much that we're heavy, we're tired, and it starts to impact us. And where that goes from there is it could lead to burnout. And burnout is pretty serious stuff. Burnout is where your whole worldview starts to change.
mm.
You start to kind of have this like existential looking at the world through really gray lenses, right? It all seems heavy and hopeless and dark. That's burnout.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is, you say that, and I'm guessing that some people might hear that and go, "No, that's not me. That's so terrible." I feel, because I've said that to people before. I've said things like, here's a great example. I couldn't go to a conference recently because I just wasn't connected with myself. And I felt like for me, I call it the hamster wheel. It's like when I start feeling like I'm on a hamster wheel. Um, and and then I also start noticing that every thought in my head is kind of negative. And of course, a second later, I coach myself out of it. But that's not my first thought. My first thought is negative, and then that exhaustion of having to coach myself out of every negative thought that I'm having. That's when I know I'm burnout. That's when I know I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And what's funny about what you just said was I said no to a work conference this year, a big one, a really important one. And I had never done that. And I had several people say, "Oh, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got some, I got to pay attention to my mental health. I'm struggling a little bit." And it was really funny, people's discomfort with that, me even saying that. I mean, I don't know. I look at it like, cold or a flu, right? Like it's that common. And maybe that's just because I've struggled with mental health issues and I've got ADHD and I've got this stuff that I've had to contend with most of my life. So to me, it's not that different. Like it just sort of comes and goes, and at least now, when it comes, I sort of recognize it right away. And I got to do the 10 things. I got to exercise. I got to eat right. I got to get my sleep right. I got to have some boundaries and say no to some things, and do some things that give me joy instead of doing things for everybody else. And then I'm back on track for quite a while until I'm not. And so I was laughing with one of my friends who was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that that's happening to you." And I was like, "Doesn't that happen to you? Like, is it just me?" Like, that was
I don't
just so interesting to me, you
I
know?
don't think it's just you. I think that you're just, and I've known you long enough to see you be on the self exploration journey to really understand yourself. You just have an awareness. And you're right, the analogy of like, okay, if you had a flu or something, or whatever, you had a physiological illness going on in your body,
Mhm.
no one would say that. No one would question you taking time to take care of yourself. So it just proves that the stigma of taking care of our mental health. And also, again, for many of us generationally, we've been told that to take time for our mental health is not okay. It's a stigmatized thing. It's, suck it up, buttercup. You know, or just don't talk about that. Don't put that out there because that's weak and that's, selfish, which you and I know is BS, right? We all have these things from time to time. You're just now know yourself enough to give yourself permission to lean into that. Like, I think it's fantastic. When you told me you did that, I was like, oh, girl, look at you.
That was big. And then to say it. And I'd said to one of my friends who acted so surprised, I said, listen, if I told you I was staying back because I had the flu, what would you say? She's like, well, I'd tell you what series to binge on Netflix and to get yourself some soup and some tea. And I said, then tell me that, because it isn't much different than that, It's just like, it's this, it's just this radical self-honoring, and it did feel selfish at first.
Hmm.
I started traveling a lot and I started doing all the things that used to make me me. And I'm sure it looked pretty crazy to a lot of the people around me because I can be a little extreme, right? I can go to one extreme or the other, the pendulum before it sort of balances back in the middle. But that's what I did. And it was funny because my boys both had admitted to me that they felt so much better that I was starting to do these things that used to make me me, like dancing and going to festivals and traveling and things like that, because they admitted that they sort of felt like a burden. Like Anthony definitely felt a little bit like a burden when I was missing everything and missing myself and wasn't connected to myself. And I was burnt out and wouldn't admit it because that's what I think part of it is too, is that burnout that you described. I was so busy powering through that. I don't even know if I would have noticed those signs. I do now, but I think for a long time, I just sucked it up and kept going.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of us do. I mean, some people go to the grave just having put their head down and powered it through, never putting their chin up and, maybe taking care of themselves and knowing themselves and doing for themselves without guilt. So I'm glad you're doing that for you.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time I still have my days like, especially when I'm by myself. Like I'll notice that, again, I've spent so much time taking care of other people, that when I'm completely alone, like at first it's like, oh, this is wonderful. I've got all these plans. I'm going to do all these things. And then this like groundlessness sets in, and it's awkward. And I usually have a little bit of time before I'm like, ooh, I don't know how I feel. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what sounds joyful. And I get kind of scrambly. And then if I stick with that long enough, I'll get to the other side where all of a sudden I really dig it. I really dig my time alone. But yeah, I still have to work on that,
Well,
here and there.
the roots run deep. Again, this most of us learned these patterns on a below the level of consciousness when we were kiddos. I mean, we've been doing it for a really long time. So, I mean, flexing those muscles, it's not a perfect art. It's just, keep making better mistakes the next day.
Oh, I like that. That's so great. I love that.
Make better mistakes tomorrow because we're going to make them.
Yeah, no kidding.
Just
So
try to make more conscious.
tell me what living, like, I thought about this idea too, like living from a place of wholeness, like what does that look like? Like, what does that look like for us?
Okay. Well, I mean, when it comes to, let's just stay on the topic of self abandonment. Like, how do you shift that? And there are some strategies, like the one I mentioned about, if no one was looking, listening, watching, judging, checking in with body, is this choice a full body yes, a hell yes? And if it's not a hell yes, it's a no thanks. So that's one question. Another one is a practice of mindfulness. Now, I know that sounds a little woo and maybe sounds a little bit bigger than most people think, but when I say that, all I mean is make it a point at a handful of times throughout your day, ideally regularly, maybe once an hour, I don't know, just stop and ask yourself, just drop into body and go, what am I feeling right now? When by feeling, I mean two things. What is my body doing? Where am I feeling, tension, tightness, discomfort, or whatever's going on in my body? That's one type of feeling, somatic feeling. And then what are the emotions that I'm experiencing right now? And it's like a many scooped ice cream sundae. You can have lots of emotions going on at the same time. You're not limited to just having one. So am and noticing it and naming it without judgment. So just being curious, what am I feeling right now? Well, I'm feeling a little tense here, here, and here. I am noticing I'm worrying about some things. Okay, I'm worrying, but not being beating up on ourselves for it. Just noticing. So by noticing, we're checking in with me. We're removing the rest of the world and just being with me, which is the opposite of self-abandonment. So that's one strategy
Mm,
that's really powerful. Another one is this statement. This is a really good one. If fear wasn't in charge, what would I do?
I love that.
Right? So it
Hmm.
it helps separate, what you truly want from what you're afraid of. Afraid of judgment, afraid something bad will happen while I'm taking care of me, so the people I love. Right?
Hmm.
So if fear
Yeah,
wasn't in charge, what would I do? Maybe another thing would be just to ask yourself, what's one small thing that I need today? A small thing, little thing. I need 20 minutes to go sit with my coffee and read my book and not have anybody talk to me or whatever it is, right?
hmm.
And then another one, when it comes to like people pleasing and self abandonment, because it's a lot about boundaries, like emotional boundaries, boundaries with time, boundaries with energy, is when I think about setting the boundary and saying no to something, what's the scary story I'm telling myself in my head that's going to happen because I set that boundary? So those are just some steps to kind
That's good. I like that
of
too, you know.
pivot out of it.
Well, because most of the time, if we, like for me, I don't even, I don't even ask myself what's the scary story. And when I do, the times I have, it's not that scary.
Mhm.
Like, so it's almost like, you're building these monsters up in your head. And if you don't name them, like you said, you don't break it down and name them, they're just so much bigger than they really are. What's going to happen? I'm going to miss out on something. Like, will I not be asked out again? Or will I not be asked to do something cool again? Or, yeah.
It's interesting you say that, like naming the fear, and this is I'm taking a lot of license here, but the movies Monsters Inc.
Yeah.
I love that movie. And this is kind of my interpretation of it, suiting my metaphor here. But when the kids see the monsters and know their names, the monsters can no longer scare them. They lose their
Oh,
power.
I love that.
So the same with our fears, when we name our fears, when we say them out loud to ourselves in our head or actually out loud, they kind of lose their charge. They're just feelings. They have no goodness, no badness, no rightness, no wrongness, no positive, no negative. They're just feelings. And we can decide, do we really?
Yeah, that's so powerful. I love that. Because a lot of the times too, when it boils down to it, the truth is I just don't want to feel uncomfortable anymore.
Yeah.
Like I just don't, I just want to avoid feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because I feel, especially in my world, I have so much discomfort sometimes, that I get hypersensitive to discomfort. So I start getting to where, well, whatever I got to say or do to just make this easy.
Hmm.
So that's, I mean, and if I named the monster and broke it down, that is clearly not enough reason. That is not good enough reason to like say yes to things I don't want to do or
And I think also it's important to kind of um, give grace and normalize this. For those of us that have been in patterns of self-abandonment, we're not putting our needs even close to the top of the list. That's been a, decades long pattern, right? That is a deeply ingrained neural network. That is our default mode, right? So when we're trying to shift out of that pattern, it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes repeated use. I mean, you have to keep getting back on the horse. You have to keep after it. Now, the beautiful thing about humans is we have this thing called neuroplasticity. We can create new neural networks until the day we die, like which is so rad, right? And a neural network is just a habit. It's a habit of thinking, a habit of behavior. And so if you have a habit of self-abandoning, putting yourself, down at the bottom of the totem pole, or if you will, it takes consistent effort to build the new path. And then guess what happens over time? Slowly but surely, the new pattern becomes the default. And the old pattern kind of like grows over or heals over and is no longer the default mode. But this takes time. So I think it's important that as we talk about this, that no one's going, oh my God, I'm a failure because of this. I suck at this. I tried it, it didn't work. Well, it's not a one and done. It's, it's a lifelong pattern of being mindful and just being aware. Like if you're listening to this now, this discussion now, and you're getting curious, I love that for you. That's the first step is being curious about what I could be doing differently.
Yeah, for sure. And my first episode in this mental health series, I talk a lot about just those preset ideas that we grow up with and that type of thing, and how you've got to actually make a choice to get out of that.
Mm,
So that is going to be really helpful to circle back to that.
good. There's one more thing I wanted to say that might ring a bell for you and for caregivers out there is a lot of us have become hyper independent.
Mm,
Or maybe even anti-dependent. Now that I think starts usually back in early life, right? Before we knew we were ever going to become caregivers, right? In your community. And so we're just not used to um asking for help or receiving help. God forbid we should actually receive some help or support. So one of the most powerful questions that I find myself asking as I heal from this pattern is how can I show up for myself the way that I wish someone else would show up for me? Or how can I show up for myself the way that I would show up for my best friend or for someone I love? And then try to do that for yourself.
yeah, that's really good. Isn't hyper independence, isn't it kind of a sign of trauma?
Yeah,
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 and
it's
so a lot of people in our community, well, in any, again, this goes for all people that are having challenging
well,
situations.
and in your community, I know it's an ongoing thing. You're denied help regularly by the organizational things that are here supposedly to help you, but you're denied. You have to fight, and they say no, and no, and no. So becoming hyper independent, well, fine, I'll just figure out a way on my own
Hmm.
because nobody shows up for me. When I do ask for help, they smack my hand and say, no, no, you can't have that help.
Hmm.
Right? So it's an ongoing traumatization that teaches you, okay, I can't have needs. I'm
Yeah, it's
apparently
really true. I never thought about it like that. And there's almost like a learned helplessness too about going and asking for help when it doesn't work out. And every time you try to do it, no one does it as well as you, or they mess something up, or,
right.
yeah. So we're not really set up to be successful. We're all told to go get help, but we're not set up for the success for that at all.
Yeah. And so you
So,
either give up, right? Or you become like hyper, I'll do it all myself. Like one of those two paths is going to happen because you keep getting gaslit and told no by the system that was supposed to be there to support you. So I have a lot.
hmm. Well, and friends and family too, because a lot of friends and family just simply don't know what to do, and they don't know how to help. And we're not very good at telling them what we need and how to help. So that becomes a thing too. So I always like to, so I want to, at these, every episode that I have, I try to get questions from people prior. I have different people I speak to, and I've been kind of putting it out there to give me your questions on the upcoming episodes, and we'll kind of ask them. And so I got a few questions for today, and they
Okay.
all circled back to one. And
Okay.
it really, it all came back to like, how do we get past the guilt?
Mm.
Like how do we get past the guilt of self-care if we've been programmed to think that's selfish?
Oh, and guilt is the number one harbinger of self-abandonment, right? That's the number one feature. Um, Sometimes it helps me to look at it through other eyes. So I think of my best friend, right? Or if I think of you and I go, if I observed Jill taking time for herself, investing in self-care, doing something that brings her joy, and would I judge her? how I wouldn't judge you. I would probably cheerlead you. So then I need to hold that mirror in front of myself and look at myself with the same loving eyes I look at everybody else with.
Yeah, that's so good.
Right? So just hold that mirror up and go, oh, okay, I can give myself. Now it's going to be uncomfy, and you're going to do it anyway. Baby steps, just keep trying it on and say it. I am feeling uncomfortable with this. I am feeling guilt. Say it out loud. Make it a thing. Acknowledge it. Notice the feelings and then keep pushing forward. And just screw up all of that bravery that you have and do it anyway. So that's how I would do it.
Yeah, that's really good. I never thought about that. And I guess the flip side of that too is I do notice back when I would judge people, it was because I was really kind of jealous that I wasn't doing it. You
Mhm.
know, if I saw somebody doing something or traveling and I'd be like, well, well, that
Yeah.
was just because I knew I really needed to, or I really wanted to, or that would bring me joy, and I just couldn't. So that goes both ways. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, I guess we can, kind of wrap up with just hearing about, any key takeaways that you think that we've missed, or
I think we've covered a lot. I have and I'll give you a link to show in the session notes, in the podcast notes if you want. But I have some interesting blog articles, and I know you probably also have written quite a bit on this, but on self-abandonment and people pleasing. And also I have a self-abandonment quiz that's kind of illuminative, right? I don't want anybody to look at it and shame themselves, but it might be interesting to take it, and that can be downloaded from my website. So I'll give you a link to that.
that would be great. I think everybody loves quizzes. We sit
It's
on
kind of fun,
some,
right? Yeah, it's just a little quiz that you can take
Yeah.
and kind of, it's nothing terribly scientific, but it is something that hopefully will get you thinking about these patterns of behavior and maybe get you curious about what might you want to change or what might you be able to start with today to gently move the needle a little bit in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great discussion. I'm really grateful to you. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm sure this won't be the last time we talk about
Love it.
this
I
kind of
love
stuff.
it. I will be excited to come back on and chat with you again.
Okay. Have a good day, everybody. And check out Talks Too Much on all the platforms. And the next episode will be on trauma and how it's overused, that word is overused, and how do we really experience that, and what does that look like, and why do we need to address it? So thanks again, and we'll talk soon. Bye. Thanks for being here with me on Talks Too Much. If today's episode helped you see things a little clearer, or you feel a little less alone, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs it. And don't forget, have faith that struggles you're in will soon be your strength. I'll see you next time.